Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thanks for joining us today for this LinkedIn Live, where we're talking about the ROI of Workplace Equity. We're really excited to be here. We're actually all in the same location, which is just the cherry on top. So we're here in Bentonville, Arkansas at Walmart HQ. It's my first time to Bentonville, and I have to say it's been quite an incredible experience, a very epic place with incredibly friendly people. So I give it an A plus 10 out of 10. If you haven't been here and you mountain bike, you should really get out here because it's beautiful. So thanks for joining us. This is on my very first LinkedIn Live. So if we do a few things wrong or things delay or things get weird, just bear with us. But we're excited to be here and super excited about the topic. So I want to first introduce the panelists that I have today, because that's what's going to make this an incredible half hour. So hopefully you can tune in for the whole time. But if not, this will be recorded and I'm sure we'll post it later. So first we have Kim Lupo. So Kim Lupo is the SVP of Global Total Rewards at Walmart. But Kim has been around the block in this area and has a ton of experience for benefits, compensation, global well-being. And I think what's really fun about Kim and getting to know her over the past couple of months is that this is a passion for Kim. This is a passion around not only figuring out what to do for associates here at Walmart, but also just through her entire career, thinking about how do you make a global rewards package for a company competitive, but also healthy, and create that ecosystem for your people that creates that sense of well-being. And delivering innovative and personalized rewards is sort of her key thing. So Kim, thank you so much for being here today. We're really excited to have you. And then we have Ellen Exum, who's the VP of Executive and Sam's Club Total Rewards. So also have gotten a great opportunity to get to know Ellen. And in her role as VP of Exec and Corporate Total Rewards, she brings a ton of experience, also gained in the trenches of HR strategy, development, management. She was at IBM prior to Walmart. Kim came to Walmart from Nike. So you've got, four huge companies that you're hearing from today in terms of total expertise. And she's just been a huge advocate for this work alongside Kim. And we're really excited to have you both here. So thanks for being here today. Okay, so let's just jump in. Let's talk about the topic that we pitched you on. So one of the things I like to do when I moderate webinars is always make sure we come back to what was the promise or the advertisement or the promo that we said we were going to cover, and then do we cover that topic? So what we talked about is that total rewards leaders in particular often have to sell leadership on why pay equity work, workplace equity, looking at opportunity, all of that is a business imperative. So what we wanted to talk about today is how do we demonstrate the tangible benefits that in a way that connects to shareholder value, the business bottom line? How do you measure success? How do you communicate results back to not only your executives, but to the board, to outside investors, to your consumers? Because in many cases, this work is directly tied to your employer brand, of course, in terms of hiring and being competitive and keeping people and reducing that sense of employee absenteeism. But it's also related to your brand overall, because consumers want to support companies that treat their people well. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, and hopefully get you some real world experience on the business benefits of prioritizing this work. So with that, we're just going to kick it off because I want to spend the bulk of the time hearing from Ellen and Kim. So Ellen, we're going to start with you with the first question around the lack of standardization in how pay equity is defined and talked about. So you hear this talked about very differently, whether it's a different company or stakeholders. How does Walmart think about pay fairness, and who are some of your key stakeholders that are engaged in the conversation? Because I know, you've spent a lot of time talking to some of the different stakeholders on this topic. So we'd love to hear from you first.
Sure, and thanks, and good morning, everyone. Really excited to be here and talk about this subject matter. I would say the way we define pay fairness at Walmart is very simple. It is that you are externally competitive and internally comparative. So we define that as fair pay overall. A lot of the constituents, the number one constituent is the associate, right, or employee, is to make sure that they understand that they are fairly paid at the deepest level and at our core. But there are others like our board of directors, right? Like our leadership in the organization, like hiring managers who are making those pay decisions, almost on a daily basis in this very dynamic organization that we work in and that many of you work in as well. The other people that I actually talk to are investors, right? Investors are really interested in ESG and in human capital management and ensuring that we're doing the right thing. But I would have to say some of my favorite stakeholders that I talk to are just like people around the Thanksgiving table, right? People around the dinner table, like associates in conferences, to hear kind of how they understand what pay equity is and what pay fairness is and how they feel about it. Like, do they trust that their companies are actually doing this in a right and meaningful way? And when there are, incidences that are not biased but do happen, like how are companies taking accountability for that and adjusting it? I will tell you, one of my challenges early on in doing this has been this whole dollar for dollar, I pay males to women. And I think when organizations look at that as the legal minimum, that just means as a group, right? They're paying dollar for dollar. But I think at Walmart, one of the things I think is special is we look at the individual level. Are we paying every individual level in all groups? So I'll stop there because I have a lot more to say about it, but I know you have more questions for us.
No, thank you. It's a great way to kick off. So, Kim, it's often the case, especially when you're thinking about a role like yours. I mean, you're the SVP, you have a massive purview, and your purview goes beyond just creating competitive packages. It's also extends to employer brand, it extends to leadership, all these other things. So, you've had to do this a number of times in terms of selling leadership on why pay equity is a business imperative. Can you share with us just some of your metrics, an approach you've used? Like, how do you think about measuring the ROI and impact of this on an organization? It doesn't have to be Walmart. I mean, you've been doing this for a long time. So any organization that you've worked with, how do you think about that? What approaches have you used?
Awesome. Thank you, Maria. And it's just a pleasure to be here. So I really appreciate the invitation. You know, you talk a lot, Maria, about workplace equity. And I really, really like that phrase because it helps us remember just the interconnectedness of our talent and reward systems. And while some of us have been on a pay equity journey for a few years now, we also really have to think about things like performance equity, like development equity, like promotion equity, and on. And like the way that we talk about it here, we leverage the expansive research that is already readily available on the positive impacts of workplace equity on business outcomes, things like talent attraction, retention, performance, productivity, engagement, and on. We know that diversity matters. Diversity impacts business success. One recent study found that a 3% increase in revenue there's a 3% increase in revenue for every 1% increase in gender diversity. That is
Wow.
powerful. We also know that diversity matters to our people. Like over 75% of employees and job seekers say that a diverse workforce is super important when they're evaluating companies, and over a third wouldn't consider a job at a company if there's not diversity among the workforce. So diversity matters. There's also expansive research that shows that fairness and transparency matter. There are a couple of studies out there that show that the majority of us, we don't believe that our pay is fair. Even if it is, even if it's competitive, even if it's equitable, we don't believe it. And that study also shows, or those studies show, that if we don't believe our pay is fair, we're 15% more likely to quit, we're 13% less engaged. And the super interesting thing, at least, for me, is that it's not your actual pay that leads to these outcomes. It's whether or not I believe it, whether I perceive it. And so to me, that is really an unlock for the criticality of work around pay transparency. And I guess I'll just hit on another body of research that I think is compelling, is that Josh Bersin, he came out less than a year ago with research that shows that companies that have reward systems that are fair and equitable are 4 times more likely to have amazing business results and 7 times more likely to innovate and adapt to change, which is super important for companies and teams, particularly in today's environment. Now, all that said, so the ROI for us is really around our ability to attract, retain, engage, and grow the amazing talent we need to fuel our business. And all that said, though, when we started our pay equity journey, yes, like we talked about ROI. Yes, we always talk about ROI. But for us, ensuring that we have an equitable pay system is foundational to our purpose, to our values as a company. And so when we talk about it, we hook it to that. Like there are 4 key values at Walmart. There's respect for the individual, act with integrity, strive for excellence, and service to the consumer. Now, having that, again, that healthy, equitable, fair kind of pay system, that is a prerequisite for us delivering on those, first 2 values. So those are a few ways we think and talk about it here.
That's incredible. I mean, you just laid down like metric after metric after metric and real business value that's not only tied to, again, your world in terms of what you're doing to create these competitive packages that bring in talent, but also that retention piece. Because as we all know, it's so much easier to retain your way to an organization of people that come from diverse backgrounds than trying to recruit your way there. So everything that you're saying really resonates in terms of what we're seeing as well. And I want to probe a little bit deeper on one thing that you said and then move to you, Ellen. So one of the concerns, and I think you mentioned that, is when people start seeing the numbers, they're really quick to come up with their own assumptions. They're quick to sort of drive a narrative in a particular way or not trust it. Or, we've learned in one of the studies that you mentioned, and also a Gartner study, that if you don't say anything as a company, people actually presume your gap is way worse than it actually is. So what are some tactics you've used to get ahead of concerns or doubts when people start seeing salary ranges, pay gap reports, where you start sort of creating the steps toward this journey of transparency? What are some of the tactics you've used to kind of get ahead of that skepticism?
I love that question. And I completely agree, Maria. Like the reality is pay transparency it's already here and it's here to stay. And so we either own our own pay narrative or have it assumed or told by others, and oftentimes incorrectly. And to tell our story compellingly in a way that builds trust across all stakeholder groups, like it has to be grounded in data. That said, I do find it helpful to think about transparency along a continuum. It's really the degree to which Walmart or any company is open about the what, why, how, and where employees are compensated. An effective pay transparency strategy considers all of these components. And I do think it's important to start with the what, the why, and the how before you can really clearly articulate and talk about the where. And so the what, that's really transparency around what individuals get paid, all of the different components of their rewards. So are you open, like is the access to info on their pay easily accessible and discernible? Is there an avenue for like questions or seeking answers to questions if associates have it? And you may think, Kim, the what, yeah, check, that's super simple. It's actually not that simple, especially when you have a workforce like we do with like 1.2 million frontline associates here in the US. Like transparency, openness, clarity around the what is really, really important before we can talk about kind of the other components. So there's the what, and then there's the why. And so that's transparency around why we pay the way we do. It's visibility into any compensation principles. I know here at Walmart, we have 4 core principles. Pay should be competitive, equitable, simple, and transparent. And so we anchor kind of messaging, we anchor program design to those principles. But again, sticking with the why, it's transparency, openness about the compensation philosophy. What is the kind of desired market position of the company? How is data used to inform the construction of salary ranges or incentive targets? What is the company's peer group? Like all of those, how does performance come alive in the pay system, or why does it come alive in the pay system? Those are all important facets to talk about with your associates or employees. And then there's the how. The how is openness, visibility, transparency into how the pay system works, which is really tied strongly to training and comms. But it's transparency around our compensation practices, things like our promotion guidelines, new hire guidelines, movement guidelines, and the mechanics behind how programs work. Things like how individual performance matters in, annual increases or in bonus payouts. It's how the pay equity process works. What are the inputs that go into it? What do we look at? How does that process fit in with other annual rhythms? So once we talk about the what, the why, and the how, then you can really talk about the where. And the where is visibility, transparency, openness into where each individual's kind of pay falls within the system itself, what their pay is within the range. Even if you're going to go even further, where kind of they fall within kind of the internal equity processes. So I think that yes, data matters. The narrative must be grounded in data, but to, I think, be as successful as we can be, it's really important to sweat all of the different facets of that kind of transparency continuum. So that's just the way that kind of we're thinking about it.
I think it's fantastic because it lays out a couple of key principles that we hear all the time. And Ellen, you and I have talked about this. And nature abhors a vacuum. So if you as the employer do not create the narrative that is based on authentic pay explainability, your associates will fill that narrative for you. And often they'll fill it with information that's not correct. So that active, even proactive role of a company and an employer to set the tone in terms of what is the message we're trying to get across, and using that continuum you mentioned, especially focused on the how, which is the part I love that you talk about, because it's so important how you go do this work and how you talk about it, how you think about the phases. You can't just go 0 to 60 when it comes to transparency. So that how is really critical. So thank you for that. You mentioned this earlier, Kim, and Ellen, I want to pivot to you and kind of go a little bit deeper on the Josh Bersin study, because Kim, you mentioned a really great stat that came out of that, which is it's not the level of pay that matters most to workers, which I think is insightful. I think that's counterintuitive to what most of us think. So it's not the level of pay that matters, but the perceived fairness of pay. So when you think about, Ellen, tackling bias and discretion head on within the salary cycle, what are you seeing, and are there other trends that you're seeing or results that you're seeing from that approach? And does that resonate with you in terms of what showed up in the Bersin study from that perception angle?
What I would say is I think it's both, right? So from what I'm seeing, but it's a lot about what Kim was just speaking about, is the transparency, like the feeling of fairness. And it comes from not only what you share in the 4 different things that Kim just talked about, but what you actually do. So does what you do match what you say? And I appreciate the transparency, and I really appreciate the story. But total rewards is not simple, what one of my colleagues calls kitchen English, right? So we don't speak in the same language that I speak at, like I said, the Thanksgiving table or the dinner table. Right? So just being able to convey that message in simple terms, but also being able to convey that pay equity or equality is not equal pay, the same pay. It's not the same pay. It's equal pay for equal work, right? And it's really just understanding that 2 people might not necessarily get exactly the same rate because they're coming to the table with 2 different things, but that it's equitable based on similarly situated people. If you had the same circumstance, yes, it should be almost exactly the same. But it's really kind of conveying that transparency in a simple way, but then really doing what you say, actually being able to pay me for my experience, for my skills. And a lot of organizations have moved into pay for performance. And again, to Kim's point about workplace equity, associates or employees need to also feel that the downstream process that leads to pay fairness is also fair. So my performance evaluation is also fair. The goals that were set for me were also fair, and that there is not bias in all of those different systems that come as a prerequisite. And then also, kind of what the upstream systems are, is am I situated in a way where I can resource and pay associates on my team in a fair and equitable way within, all of the systems that are put in place. So I think when we try to address fairness, we generally try to address, here's the dollar value, as Josh says. Like, and people are like, okay, I understand the dollar value, but I want to understand the deeper, the why, all of the things that Kim just talked about. And I really want to make sure that actually what you say you can do, you actually are doing for me. And I think that's one of the things that our process puts into place to make sure that we're delivering and we say what we do and we do what we say.
Yeah, I love that. It's the accountability piece. And I think what I'm hearing loud and clear from both of you is that this is a journey. This is a series of steps. And what you have to do is you have to infuse process. You have to infuse data. You have to infuse accountability in order to kind of move through those steps on your way to wherever it is that you want to get to then garner those business benefits. So my next question, and Kim, I'll start with you. Ellen, I want you both to take a stab at this one, if you can. What advice would you give? Because companies are everywhere all along the map, right? Some companies maybe have done a backwards facing audit. Maybe they used, a consultant or something like that, and they're doing it once a year and they're not doing it in ongoing ways. So then they have to remediate over and over again. Some companies, maybe now they're doing it in an ongoing way, but they're still sort of not talking about it at all. And they're thinking about how they want to take a baby step toward pay transparency or explainability. Like, what advice would you give companies as they're thinking about the key factors that contribute to success of a long-term embedded initiative like this?
I'll start and then I'll hand it over to you, Ellen, and love the question. I would say, like, first, from a mindset perspective, we have to remember that workplace equity isn't something you achieve. It's something you are always achieving. It's an ongoing discipline. Associates join, leave, move within the organization every day, every hour. Pay decisions are made every day, every hour. So we have to proactively embed kind of equity into all decisions, processes, policies, practices, so we can stave off any issues before they show up. And Maria, I'm going to use a phrase that you use often, which is we have to get pay right from the start at every moment in the employee life cycle. Hiring, again, promoting, transferring, even when folks transition out of a company. Because if you don't, inequities just continue to exacerbate. So those are a few things. I'd also add, just get the right folks involved in the work. Like, this is not an issue for a compensation team to solve alone. It is a broader sort of, broader people team. Bring in people partners, bring in folks from the talent organization, of course, legal. You must have like great, BI, data, tech. And then I guess kind of like going to tech, do not underestimate the benefit that will be delivered to you and your company if you leverage like a best-in-class platform or technology solution to help with this work. As I know we do at Walmart with Syndio. Like, imagine trying to do pay equity analysis for 2.4 million worldwide associates without a great tool to help with the ingestion of the data, the modeling, helping us explain the data, use the data, inform decision making. So data and tech, super important. The last thing I just comment on quickly is just be transparent and communicate often. Like, again, this is a journey. So talk to your stakeholders, talk to your associates, talk to your leaders about where we are in the journey that we're on, the journey that you're on. That's so critical to gain trust kind of with all of the folks that you are working with and who find this work kind of super important. So those are a few things top of my mind. Ellen, I'll punt it to you to see what you would add.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. All of the above. Just a couple of adds I would say is, again, when you are thinking about this journey, it is not a check the box. It is not a once a year event. It is not solving for something that has been said about you so that we can say this. I think we talked about this, Maria, before. A lot of these issues come up that are important, like global issues. And we try to come up with something that's going to say, we have fixed this. And we kind of address each one of these things as a moment. Okay, that moment, we have addressed that moment and it passed. And I think we really need to look at this as a movement and not just a single point in time. And it's so much more comprehensive than just when, by the time you have gotten to pay, there are so many things that have happened that needs equity in those processes before you even get there. The other thing I just really think about when I think about when we started this journey, or when I was talking to other companies as I started this journey, is really being able to categorize and catalog the criteria and scope of each job so that you can compare people and you can come up with exactly what equitable means, right? A lot of us have these, to Kim's point, back office systems that really don't allow us to show like for like associates. And it actually makes it very difficult to explain to an individual how they're competitively and fairly paid. But doing this back office work and really just making sure that you have a simple process to say, this is your role, this is what is paid for your role, and this is how you progress through the pay scale of that role. I think doing that work is really important, and being able to explain it builds the trust of the associate or the employee and allows us to speak our truth and allows the associate to speak their truth. But I think the most important thing is that it's a journey, as Kim said. It's not a destination. And as soon as we get to that destination, there'll be new things that will come up that we will need to explore as society continues to evolve. And we just really need to keep our eye on what is the right thing to do and how do we do it. Let's not talk about it, but let's actually do it. And then what we say actually is shown in the work that we're doing.
Yeah, and I think you've both laid the groundwork for that in such a powerful way. I want to end with a question, not to end things on a down note, but to give folks out there a little bit of hope and help and just practical advice, because I think the way in which you both come to this conversation is with such courage and confidence, and you're bold, and you've got ownership of the data and the information. What advice would you give to folks that are facing challenges? So maybe talk a little bit about what challenges you faced and overcame, and what advice you have for leaders or practitioners who are facing similar challenges, whether that's making a case for this work, whether that's really starting to dig in, getting the team, figuring out how to partner. What advice would you give for people who are either getting started or just facing some of those challenges?
I talk to others, right? Make sure you understand where some of the things are, learn from others. Really, like I said, some of the largest challenges are the technology, are like getting all of the information together, understanding the associate lens and understanding what those needs are. Obviously, getting the support of your board and your leadership and all of that. But I guess the best thing that I have found through this actual process is really learning from my own and others' mistakes or opportunities or challenges, and then building on them and being transparent about them. I'll stop there and I'll ask him to share, who has been part of the journey.
Yeah, I'd add, well, a couple things. To be kind of vulnerable with our journey here on the call, I would say we're actually at a pivot moment here at Walmart. Pivot not in terms of how we think about, not a pivot in terms of our approach to pay equity and our processes and practices, but rather how we talk about it, around how transparent we are. We have been, on the pay equity journey now for a few years. I think, Maria, we've been partnering with you for going on 3. We do regular analysis, but we haven't talked about what we do. We haven't shared our methodology. We haven't shared kind of what's in scope. We haven't talked in kind of details around our results, or, to Ellen's comment, how we approach pay equity kind of very broadly and embed it within other parts of the kind of rewards and talent system. So we're in a moment where we are ready to start talking about that in a more open way, because in the absence of us owning that narrative, others are going to tell it for us. And I would say, this isn't specific to Walmart, but I think it is applicable. I think one of the reasons employers are reticent to talk about these is, one, they feel angst around org readiness. Like, is the org gonna understand pay equity? It's complicated. Like, do we have sort of the time and attention to walk, our associates through this kind of complex, body of work, and will they be able to understand it? I mean, I guess advice I would say, and this is from, work I've done in the pay equity space for many, many, many years, is do not underestimate your organizations and your employees' capacity for understanding. They want to learn about this topic. They want to learn what you do, how you think about it, how it comes to life. And I think the other thing that I hear often, my last comment, is just concern around attorney-client privilege. Like, how far can you go? Like, does transparency put us in a compromising position from that perspective? And actually, the answer is no. There's recent case law even that really hits on that topic. So I guess, again, don't underestimate your organization's appetite for this topic, and be vulnerable, be transparent, kind of talk about the journey that you're on. Maria, those are the few things top of my mind.
I love it. And I think that's a great place to end, because it is such practical advice for folks that are just starting in the middle, or like you said, you've been at this a while and now there's still more to do. So I think it just reiterates what we said at the top, which is this is ongoing. And I love that quote, which is, this isn't something you achieve, it's something that you're always achieving. And in the next phase of achievement could be, how are we going to talk about this? How are we going to start to infuse pay explainability and transparency? But it is an ongoing journey, and we're just so grateful to be on it with you. So thank you both so much for being here with us today. And I look forward to experiencing more of this incredible place that you call home in Bentonville. So thanks for having me. Thanks everybody.